Hey everyone, my name is Lelaine Art Geek, and it's so nice to have you here today. Welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how I'm starting my Inktober sketchbook, but also give you guys some advice or tips that I've learned over the years of not even finishing my Inktober series anymore per year, but that I've learned throughout however long I've done Inktober for. So let's go ahead and get started. But before I actually start talking about these tips, I do want to talk about what we're drawing here. So these are my two characters. The girl on the left is Cassie and the boy on the right is Caleb. And the dog in the middle, I actually don't have a name for him yet. He's kind of just like a random dog that I actually drew sometime in 2019 in one of my Inktobers with these two characters as well. So I actually don't know a name for him. So if you have a name for him, let me know. So that's who I'm drawing today. And they're kind of good examples of some of the tips that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So the first tip that I would like to share when you're starting out Inktober with a sketchbook, like a sketchbook dedicated to Inktober, is there are no rules, but do you need to follow all of them? So the thing that most artists usually think about whenever they start like a sketchbook dedicated to one thing is, oh, I have to keep up with it. I need to have established rules, because if I break those rules, then that means it's like an imperfect sketchbook. And I usually tell them, like, yes, if you are having a dedicated sketchbook to something, it would be nice to kind of have the majority of the sketchbook be that concept or that one thing, but you shouldn't have to beat yourself up for breaking some of those rules. The best example that I can think of with Inktober is you do not have to do all of the days. Like, there are 31 days in the month of October, and you do not have to do all 31. Another best example is that I actually started this drawing October 3rd, actually, because I was kind of busy and I didn't have time to actually draw any of my Inktobers until the 3rd. So I already broke that rule right then and there, and here I am. I have a sketchbook dedicated to Inktober, and I already broke that rule. But you know what? It's completely okay. You don't have to follow the 31-day rule. It would be nice and consistent though, especially if you're trying to share these on social media and kind of grow as an artist professionally, that you do keep a little bit of that consistency. However, if you miss like a couple of days or even like a week, like, do not beat yourself up. And I know that certain circumstances just rise where you can't like make any drawings for almost 2 weeks. And even though it's like, yes, you want to build that consistency, never ever beat yourself up for events that you can't even control and that you can't, manage, and basically just don't beat yourself up. I do that a lot and it doesn't help anyone. And so better yet to help yourself by just not beating yourself up and making sure that, like, even though it's good to have that consistency, you don't want to have to go through burnout or anything like that. So keep that in mind, definitely. And yeah, there are a lot of rules that are often broken during the month of Inktober or the month of October, but people still keep creating. They still keep making these Inktober's, and honestly, I highly doubt that there's anyone breathing against their backs on like, oh my god, you missed a day, how dare you, you're not an artist if you miss a day, artists don't take care of themselves. Like, I don't think you should ever beat yourself up because you miss a day, and just know that like even professional artists, they basically break a lot of rules all the time. So again, you do not need to pressure yourself and stick to some of these rules, because it's only just gonna hurt yourself, not gonna help anyone out, and the point of this is just to have fun, and sometimes fun results in breaking a few rules. So the second tip I would like to share is the sketchbook itself. So the sketchbook that I'm actually using is called the Master's Touch sketchbook. I believe it is 8.5, or not 8.5, but 8x8. And I think it's such a good size because an 8x8 sketchbook is great for Instagram. And I didn't actually think about that until I bought it, and I was thinking, oh my god, I can definitely like post on Instagram with this. And I also believe that, having an 8x8 sketchbook is kind of like that nice middle where it's not too big and not too little. If you have a little sketchbook, while yes, you are able to complete ink drawings more quickly like that, in the grand scope of all things, if you're trying to kind of have, like if you have like bigger ideas that you want to try out whenever you do your next Inktober, then you have the size limit to worry about, and then vice versa. If you have a bigger sketchbook, like a really big sketchbook, you have a lot of paper to cover, and that could be time consuming. So I recommend definitely getting a sketchbook that's right in the middle, like in the nice middle. I actually highly recommend this sketchbook in particular, or any sketchbook that's 8x8, especially if you want to branch out on Instagram and post your Inktober drawings on Instagram, like how I would do it. And of course, the actual type of paper, clearly, it doesn't matter, but it does depend on the kind of medium that you're using, and actually mediums are the next tips that I'm going to be sharing in this video. So it just depends on the medium that you're using, and it also depends on how much of that medium you're putting onto the paper. That is an absolute must that you need to understand before you buy a sketchbook. And I feel like if you're an artist that uses sketchbooks on the daily, you would already understand that. But if you're starting out as an artist using the Inktober challenge, then that's something you might want to consider. So yes, for sketchbooks, make sure you get that perfect medium. 8x8 is recommended. I like 9x12 as well. It's a little bit bigger than 8x8, actually significantly a little bit bigger, but I think that it's still a relatively good size, especially if you want to go a little bit bigger but not feel too intimidated to cover a lot of paper space. So I would definitely also recommend 7x10. 7x10 was the size that I used for my past Inktober's, and that worked wonders. So definitely consider those sizes if you want to. And yeah, those are my sketchbook recommendations and scale recommendations. So the next topic, or the next tip that I want to talk about, is what I've already mentioned not too long ago, but it is about ink mediums, or actually just mediums in general, and I will explain. So basically, of course, in the month of Inktober, you have to use ink to make your drawings, because that is literally the point of Inktober. However, and I know that the creator himself kind of mentioned this a few years ago, but even though you are using ink, you can definitely start out with pencil. That's actually what I did. So earlier in this video, I used Kohl Erase, the Prismacolor Kohl Erase in the shade red, and I always use that whenever I make any base drawings before I ink it. and especially during Inktober, I use it a lot. So that is one of the mediums that's not ink that I use. And sometimes, depending on what subject matter I'm working with, I might also use watercolor here and there. I'm not using watercolor in this piece right now. I'm actually using ink wash, like a bottle of ink, and I use water to dilute it. But again, sometimes if I want to achieve certain colors and I don't have the ink bottle for it, I will usually resort to using watercolor. And again, you shouldn't have to put pressure on yourself because you're not using ink. Literally, as I sketch, I use pencils, so that's already not ink. But however, if you are gonna stick to 1 to 2 mediums, I suggest you keep it consistent. So for instance, as you can see here, I'm using pen for kind of like the line art, and I'm also using the ink wash, which means I decided on using these 2 mediums, 3 if you consider the cool erase pencil at the beginning, to make my Inktober drawings for the rest of the month. So I thought that this was the best route because it's the perfect medium for my style, and I think it just looks the greatest in my opinion, at least like with my art. Obviously you have different ways to do your ink drawings, so it's just up to opinion, but the way that I do it, especially with the style that I have, I believe that is the best way to kind of showcase it. So that's why I kind of went with this medium. A lot of people like to use brush pens, which I didn't use here. I actually don't enjoy using brush pens, at least for line work. My hand gets too jittery whenever I do that, so I don't even bother. The kind of pen that I use for line art is the Tombow calligraphy pens. Calligraphy pens are wonderful for line art. Like, if you think that you just only have to use calligraphy for typography and lettering, you are absolutely wrong. You can definitely use them for line art in visual artwork, and I don't think anyone should tell you otherwise, because I use a lot of things that are not for its intended purpose. So I would say stick to maybe 1 to 2 mediums or 1 to 2 materials. Keep it consistent. It also helps because it's not going to get confusing. Like, if you do decide to change up your medium, then you're just going to have to get a lot more materials, or like you have to buy more, unless if you already own them. And I feel like it just gets a little too overwhelming. We're trying to avoid overwhelmingness, unless if that's what you want, then that's on you. But at least for me, I'm trying to avoid overwhelmingness, and the best way to do it is just to stick to one thing and one thing only, and it is to just use the mediums that you're the most comfortable with and stick with it for the entire Inktober challenge. So that is my tip on that. And this 4th tip now, we're at number 4, for completing your Inktober sketchbook, is having 1 or more consistent characters or subjects. I'm sure you kind of already see the theme here. Like, whenever you keep a sketchbook, consistency is the number 1 kind of idea that you would want to practice whenever you keep a sketchbook dedicated to one thing, and it is consistency. And I still want to keep repeating that because it's true. Like, if you want to have a sketchbook that's dedicated to one thing, such as Inktober, obviously, then yeah, consistency is a big thing. And I also highly recommend having a consistent character, 1 or 2. If you go a little bit more than that, and that gets a little overwhelming. Again, the key word overwhelming is something that we're trying to avoid. But what I mean by having a consistent character or subject is what I'm actually doing here. So Cassie and Caleb actually started, like they were created for the Inktober challenge back in 2017 actually. And I drew them in each of my Inktober drawings in 2017. And then in 2019, or I think 2018 actually, I do not know my years, but I brought them back and I drew them in each Inktober drawing, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't really have to think about what I wanted to draw because my characters are already there. I already formulated my ideas for each of the characters, and it's nothing too confusing, because if you're just sitting there in front of your sketchbook being like, oh my gosh, like what's the subject matter for my next Inktober drawing? And you know, I'm over here just telling myself, you know what, let's just draw Cassie and Caleb again and again and again and again. And it worked. It actually worked. So if you ever have any doubts about trying to think of ideas per day for the month of Inktober, then I do recommend having a set of characters. Usually 1 or 2 is best. And of course, I don't know if you guys have already seen, if you're new to Inktober, but there are usually prompts. The Inktober creator himself posts prompts like a month before Inktober starts, and it's usually a good handful of like different words, and it's good for idea building and thinking about like inspiration for your drawings. And I feel that using that with the combination of using other characters as well that you create is wonderful, because you already have ideas that are already created for you there to kind of give you a jump start, and all you have to do now is think of everything else, draw it, and post it. So I believe that it's just an easy way to kind of think of ideas, especially since this is a daily challenge during the month and you kind of have to think either in advance or on the fly. I kind of do a mix of both. I think in advance and on the fly. It just depends on like how busy your life is outside of art. So it varies from person to person, but I do recommend, at least for the first maybe few days or so, kind of getting the hang of it, just having a consistent character. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can literally be a square or like literally anything, and keep it consistent. And I think from there you also kind of get ideas for stories in the long run, because that's how Cassie and Caleb came to be. Like, they started for Inktober for 1 year, and then I decided, oh my goodness, I absolutely love drawing these characters. I'm gonna make a story based on these characters, and I have a ongoing story for them right now, and that's how it worked. So once again, having that consistency, keyword, consistency is a vital part of maintaining a sketchbook if you are absolutely 100% serious, and if you want to grow professionally. That is one of the tips I would recommend when you're completing Inktober. And last but not least, actually, this is my last tip, my 5th tip, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the last tip as well, is telling a story. If you ever need ideas on stories, or if you don't know where to start, look into media, look into what is on TV, look into what movies are playing, and you can base your inspiration off of that. I would say that the more simple your story is, the better, because once again, you are doing this challenge on the daily, and if you kind of make it into a complicated story, then you kind of need more days than just 31 to kind of tell your story, or you run into the risk of having a large story to where you need more time to tell it, and it's kind of not good, because then others would be a little bit confused, and it just wouldn't, you know, it would also make you confused, because of the fact that there's so much in 1 month to tell, and it can be a problem, personally. Like, to me, it was a problem. I tried to be ambitious, but then I realized, oh, if I count the amount of days I have in the month plus however drawings I need to tell the story, then that again runs into an issue. So tell a story if possible and keep it short and sweet. And it doesn't even have to be like, the story doesn't even have to make sense. Like if the story is just in one photo, then, or one drawing, then that's completely fine. If the next drawing is a different story, then that's, you know what, that's completely fine too. It doesn't have to be, and this time around doesn't have to be consistent. But how I would do it is I would have a simple story, and then each drawing is considered a quote unquote panel, like a comic page. I don't know why I messed up my words there, but it's kind of like a comic page pretty much, but it's an illustration form. You're literally telling a story through images, and I feel that, you know, using that for Inktober is the best way to tell that, to practice that kind of storytelling craft. So keep it short, sweet, simple, and even if you are ambitious to tell a longer story, then make sure, and again, especially if you're trying to do this professionally, make sure that your audience knows so that they can be on the lookout for more drawings from you, rather than just, oh, you're telling a really engaging story, then all of a sudden you stop telling it and it's like, wait, what? I mean, I'm a big hypocrite on that, I'm not gonna lie, but I feel that if you are trying to grow professionally, you want to make sure that you also keep your audience engaged, and also it's just nice as well when you have a completed sketchbook that tells a story. So pretty much I would say that keeping the consistency, I keep repeating the word consistency here, but it's so important, and making sure that your story means something to you is super, super important, and kind of more personable, like people would relate to it a little bit more. And again, going towards like the sketchbook itself, it's like, how, like, nothing can be more beautiful than having a full sketchbook that tells a story, and it's almost like a comic book, you know what I'm saying? So I would definitely recommend that. I'm trying to do the same here, but I don't know if like my schedule will allow me to kind of be ongoing with Inktober this year. I tried to also tell a story through each image rather than going through to like an entire storyline through multiple images, which is what I originally wanted to do, but I guess it just, I don't know. I have doubts for this year. We'll see though, but like I said, if you just want to tell a story through one image and then tell a different story in the next, nothing wrong with that. But just keeping the idea of storytelling in general is usually the best way to go. When you don't have any other ideas about what you want to tell through your Inktober's, and I'm actually super, super excited to be back with Inktober. So I'm so excited to see other people creating their stories and their ink drawings. And I wish that like this challenge itself could last for literally like years, even though it's already been a few years. I just think that it's such a great challenge that like I wish it never dies out. And honestly, I actually don't think it'll die out, because the popularity of it has grown tremendously since then. I just know that back in 2017, it was such a big hit. And I don't know, I feel that like this year, even though people are still participating, there aren't that many people that are doing it anymore. And I I kind of wish, like, you know, people would do it a little bit more. I don't know why I said that twice, but here we are. But pretty much that is all I have to say in this video, and I really hope that you guys enjoy and you found this a little useful. I kind of went on tangents a lot in here, and I apologize, but hopefully these tips will help you maintain your Inktober sketchbooks and kind of give you an idea of what you want to do for Inktober in general. And here is my finished piece. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.